Shanghai GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
This is primarily a question and answer show. So if any of you out there would like to ask questions.
Afternoon, developers. We're here to welcome you today to the September 20th edition of Google Developers Live for Google Apps Script. My name is Ikai Lan.
And I'm Eric Kalita.
And we've got a good show for you guys today. So we're going to recap the Austin Hackathon, which happened last week. Eric's going to show us a really cool app that he's been working on. It integrates with Google Plus and Google Apps Script. And after that, we're going to go ahead and answer some live questions, as well as some of the questions on Google Moderator. So
Sounds
first
great.
off, let's talk about Austin.
Oh, that was a blast.
Yeah, we were Eric and I were in Austin last week hosting a hackathon, and at the hackathon we had a lot of really great participants. So if any of you guys are watching right now, you guys were awesome. We had a great time meeting you all, right?
Yeah, no, it was a blast. We had a lot of excitement out there. People that really ranged the spectrum too of existing AppScript developers to people who are brand new to it, some students, some people from enterprise. It was great.
Yeah, we saw a couple of pretty good apps that got built. There's one guy, he uses Google Drive to store all of his invoices. His name is Will. And what he does is he put together an app script that goes through entire Google Drive and pulls out all of his spreadsheets, and it builds a dashboard that tells him how much money he's been making. And it was kind of funny because he demoed this application to a live audience with his live data, and he was like, "This is how much cash flow I have." And I was like, "Oh, that's good, that's good." But he was a really cool guy. I really had a good time talking to him.
We embrace openness here at Google, so you know, I think it fit with the theme of the event.
Here's my PIN number, by the way. We had this other guy who he worked for a government, I believe, and I was super impressed by the app. Now he was probably the only guy that had extensive AppScript experience.
Right.
And what he built was an application. It was a combination of AppScript and Fusion tables that everybody riding in a squad car or a fire engine would have a laptop with I think it was a 3G connection. Mm-hmm. And what would happen was you could look at it, and at any given time you could look on a map and see where are all the other squad cars, where are all the fire engines, and he was doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I love seeing that integration with Fusion tables too. You know, with ScriptDB, we've got this new way of storing data, but Fusion tables is great, especially if it has like a lot of relational things.
Right, right.
So I think it really worked good for him.
It was all the geo stuff, and the ScriptDB. He showed me all this stuff. I was like, "Oh my God, you built that?" And he goes, "Oh, actually, ScriptDB, I used Fusion tables instead."
Okay.
Oh, that reminds me, there was another really cool app that we saw demoed, who was the one guy who, it was a Google map, and do you remember this? It was a document where if I sent you 5 points of interest, it would find like the shortest path to all of these things, and it would email you directions.
Yeah, I think he was like imagining a delivery person, right? You know, having to make 5 different deliveries. What's the best route?
Right. That was a really good application, and I remember there were some comments there from me but about holy moly. So you have these points. Find me the shortest path to all of these points, and he goes, "Actually, I just call it the optimized route." method. I was like, "We have that? That's awesome."
Google Maps in AppScript, the direction finder has this great feature: optimize. One flag, you're done.
Right. And for everyone that's studied computer science before or mathematics, you know that this is something called the traveling salesman problem, which is
not easily solved.
Not easy, but somebody did it,
Yeah.
and you could take advantage of it. Overall, I had a great time in Austin. What'd you think?
Yeah, I had a blast out there as well. I mean, a really good environment in the room. People were excited. You know, they had a lot of fun too, and I think people were really impressed at how much they could get done during the short amount of time of a hackathon. You know, because there wasn't the need to set up an environment. We didn't have to guide people through getting Eclipse configured correctly. They just opened their browser and they were going straight away.
Right. Eric was like that. All right, he was on top of everything. Like this. This is my on top of stuff.
Okay, yeah.
I tried to. One thing I tried to do when I was in Austin was I tried to go visit this barbecue place, and I tried to get Eric to come with me, but he just wouldn't do it.
Well, I had barbecue at the airport, and I know that doesn't sound right, but it was actually like a legitimate joint that had an outpost there.
Legitimate?
So
Franklin Barbecue is legitimate.
No, I would have gone, but like this wasn't like Joe's Wild West Barbecue in the airport. This was like a real Austin place.
Oh, it was the place that Mike recommended.
Exactly.
Salt Lake.
Salt Lake, yeah.
Yeah. So I will say Austin Barbecue is legit, and so are Austin developers. So thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, and I think we're looking forward to do some more hackathons in the future.
Look forward to announcements. They're coming
soon.
They're coming soon. So I think that's enough of us just talking about how awesome Austin is.
I think so.
So Eric has an application he's been working on that he'd like to demo. So Eric, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. So, with Google I/O this year, we launched the ability to create web apps in AppScript. You can publish as a web app, use the user's credentials in order to make calls to Google services, publish straight to the Chrome Web Store from within Google AppScript. So we've been working here on the developer relations team to build some sample apps to kind of demonstrate what's possible and kind of get people excited about building apps in AppScript. So the app I built is lovingly called Feed Plus. And the concept is pretty similar. I don't know. I'm a Google Plus Power user, and I don't know.
Power user? What does that mean?
It means I'm on there multiple times a day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I use it a lot, and I also use it to keep track of what other people are doing with AppScript. So what I really wanted was a way to kind of track new posts about Google Plus activity that was going on. And for me, the natural interface was Google Reader. That's where I spent a lot of my time also monitoring different things. So I created an app that allows you to take Google Plus activities and turn it into an RSS feed that you can add to Reader. So this is kind of like, it's great because it demonstrates and utilizes a few different things in the Google AppScript kind of set of APIs that we have that are pretty cool. But let's start by just kind of demoing what it looks like and how you use it. So I'm zoomed in super far here, so all you're seeing is a giant white screen. But there's not much outside that anyway. So it gives you the option to create a feed out of either a user's public profile. It's all the things that they post publicly, not any private or things shared just with circles, or search results, which is what I like to use. So for instance, if I search for AppScript and hit preview, we get to see a preview of some recent posts about Google AppScript. So this is just kind of rendered here to make sure that your search terms are correct and that you're getting the right kind of content. And then from there, you can just add that feed to your feed library. And then once it's in the library, you have an RSS link and a link straight to Google Reader that'll kind of preload that feed in Google Reader for you. And then just some additional management to kind of delete your feeds if you no longer want them.
So Eric, tell us about some of the different APIs that you're using to make this happen.
Yeah. So to render this front end here that we're taking a look at, that's the HTML service, which we launched at Google I/O this year. So I'm using my own custom HTML, CSS, JavaScript, including a whole lot of jQuery. And I even integrated some other JavaScript library, underscore, if people have used that before. And I'm going to post more about how that integration works later on.
This is Eric's endless underscore evangelism. You're going to hear this about 10 times more in the future.
Yeah,
Go on.
I love underscore.
I'm not saying it's bad. It's
no.
just that,
Yeah. I mean, jQuery is great. Underscore has some cool power features, too. So that's kind of what I used to render this front end here. And it's great because, with the UI app in the past, you were kind of limited. It was kind of easy to set things up, but you couldn't just do whatever you wanted. Here, I have complete control over the styles, the JavaScript, the callbacks, kind of the flow and feel of the application. And then, in addition, all this information about the feed library is stored in ScriptDB, which we mentioned earlier. And it allows me to query on just the feeds that I've created, my own user. And it also allows me to save and retrieve the metadata associated with these feeds. So that was a really easy way to kind of store this data after I created a feed. And then the third major thing I used was the content service, which we just recently published a new guide for. And the content service is what allows me to serve an RSS feed from Google AppScript. I can construct the XML inside of the script and then publish it out. And then it's consumable by Google Reader or theoretically other feed readers.
Right. One thing that we're asking is, what do you do to get the Google Plus data? Like, what's the API you're using, and what complications do you run into?
That's a good point. Yeah. So Google Plus provides an API, and I'm using the unauthenticated version. I actually just want to have the public data because the RSS feeds I'm creating, in order to be accessible by Google Reader, they need to be in the public domain. Google Reader doesn't have your credentials at the time of making the request. So because of that, I wanted to limit this just to public data. I don't want anybody's private data leaking out. And so using the unauthenticated public Google Plus API, I used the URL fetch app to kind of build the URL and then got back the JSON data, which I parsed via json.parse in my script. So using those techniques, I was able to fetch data from Google+. And I'm using some caching, too. We have the cache service in AppScript that allows you to set a time on how long some information should be cached. So I made it so that if you keep hitting preview over and over again, you're just going to get the most recent data from about for 5 minutes. It's going to cache that data. That way, we're not overloading the Google+ API or running out of quota there.
Cool. Very, very cool.
So this is in the Chrome Web Store now. You can kind of take a look at it and try it out. And I'm going to be publishing a series of kind of like walkthroughs. I haven't decided the format yet. Maybe textual, maybe a video, kind of showing how the technology behind this works and hopefully give you guys some pieces that you can reuse in your own scripts.
Okay, very cool. Thank you, Eric.
No problem.
So why don't we move on to some live questions? So if for those of you on the Hangout, if you have any questions about Eric's application or any of the tools that he used, do feel free to jump on and ask us.
All right. So do we have anybody on the Hangout?
We've got. Well,
Oops.
looks like we've got one guy. Hey there. Hold on for a second. We're gonna. Ooh.
Oh.
We're gonna get on the moderator page.
All right, so yeah, if you have any questions, come in later. I'm going to just pop open the moderator here. And here, let me reshare so that we can get a view of that. Whole picture-in-picture here. All right.
All right.
Here's the Google moderator. So we've got some questions here, but yeah, feel free to jump in later if there are any live questions. So this one, top of the list here, what is the best, well, what's the top one here? What is the best way to store pictures with Google Apps Script? He needs to store about 3,000 JPEG photos and 1,000 PDFs every day. And they must be protected from the general public, but accessible by his own domain and by outside business partners.
Well, the first thing, Rudy, we're curious is, do you have 3,000, period, or do you need to add 3,000 photos a day? That's quite a lot of photos, and even though we try to make our quotas pretty high, I feel like you're going to trip some kind of quota there.
Yeah, I know you've been running it. You've been using developing an app that actually writes a lot to Google Drive.
Right, and we're trying to get to Google Drive right quota raised, but 3,000 a day is going to be pushing it.
Yeah.
That's a good question. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Google Drive is definitely the right place to store these.
Right.
One way you may be able to get around or deal with the quotas in Google Drive is if you don't need each photo to be individually in Drive, but maybe zip them up and upload the whole zip to Google Drive. That may count as only one upload. But then again, 3,000 photos zip may still be too large for a single upload.
And one thing that you might be able to do is you might be able to use ScriptDB, and I believe you can pass a blob to ScriptDB. I'm not exactly sure how it works out, but even if you can, I'm sure you can encode the blob. But you're going to trip size limits on the JPEGs themselves. So I guess the big question is, are you adding 3,000 JPEGs a day? Or is it just a persistent, roughly 3,000 with a few every day coming in? Because if you have a few coming in every day, probably Google Drive is the best way to go.
Yeah, I would say, it definitely doesn't sound like a use case that's so far out of bounds. Like I know you were talking to the team about getting the Drive write quotas up. So this is something that, if you can give us maybe some more background, we can make a compelling case for why this should be allowed in Google Drive, and we can talk to the teams about that.
Good.
Great. All right, the next one we have here, what steps are you taking to improve Google Apps Script performance in terms of speed, both pure JavaScript speed as well as key services like spreadsheet service? There's an issue in the issue tracker he references here. Can the engineering team focus on that rather than new features and services? Well, I know that performance has been on their radar recently. I've been working one of our engineers who they've been definitely taking a look at the performance, doing more benchmarking, more testing, and I think they have some things that they're looking into. Obviously, we need to balance both. People want to keep doing more and more with Google Apps Script, and we want to make sure that new compelling things are possible. But at the same time, obviously, sometimes performance can affect the viability of an idea.
Right. I think that performance is really important, but at least from a priority standpoint, from my perspective, in terms of the pure JavaScript part of the performance, I'd like to see the dashboard and some login improvements before I see pure JavaScript improvements. So, as many of you may know, the JavaScript is interpreted via Rhino, and the Rhino engine is fairly performant. It runs on top of the JVM. So, if you're doing pure computation, like let's say you're trying to calculate, you're trying to factor the product of large prime numbers. I mean, that's going to be hard in any kind of platform. But we really need to understand, what part of JavaScript performance is killing you. Are you creating lots of objects really quickly and getting rid of them? And that should be fine in a JVM as well. But we want to know what it is from terms, because there's two parts here, right? One is the pure JavaScript, and the second part is the service. Now the service, we definitely need to improve the performance on the service. The pure JavaScript, we like to know what bottlenecks you run into. Now,
that's a key point, because we want to make everything faster, but only if that fastness actually gives real life benefit, right?
Right.
We want to make sure that all the work we do produces tangible results and makes people's lives actually better. So, if we cannot, compute prime numbers as fast as some other platform, is that actually going to affect whether or not you can send an email in a workflow?
Right.
So we want to make sure that what we're doing actually has impact. But if there is a real impact that you have, like an app that's not working well because of raw JavaScript performance, leave that feedback in the issue tracker.
Now there is one type of issue where I think the raw performance may be hindering some people, and I've heard about this from some people, from you guys and some folks on the core engineering team, which is regular expression parsing. So if you have these types of issues, do let us know, because we have seen this, and it tends to be with very, very long, large, complicated regular expressions, but these problems do exist.
Yeah. All right, great. So the next one we have here is there was a major outage of HTML service this week with continuing issues coming from it. Can you talk about the cause and the reliability of HTML service and any future steps you're taking to improve it? Some concerned customers. So it is true that HTML service was down a little bit. Was it yesterday, right?
It was down for about half of a day, yes.
Yeah, half a day.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that everybody regretted and felt bad about. We're trying to keep all of these services very stable. And so one of the things that we especially looked at was getting the information out there in a better way. We do have a dashboard at script.google.com/dashboard that tells you about certain services kind of like having any problems and their uptime, more or less. Unfortunately, HTML service wasn't already baked into that dashboard.
Yeah.
So we're looking at definitely making sure that it's on there, as well as other key services, as well as maybe adding additional information to that dashboard. So that's one thing that we're definitely looking into. Yeah.
We're also talking about different ways of doing notification. Now, there's one way is to put it on the dashboard, but some of the other things we can do is, actively notify developers, because the thing about HTML service is that we knew it was happening, so we could have notified developers. But the best we could do at this point was to post something in the issues tracker and try to answer questions as quickly as we could see them.
That's a good point. We did post on the issue tracker as well,
Right.
which was a good way to kind of get the follow-up on when it was resolved. But yeah, and if there are other ways that you prefer to be contacted, give us that feedback. You can reach us on Google+. Just let us know, like, if there's another medium that works better for you.
Right.
All right, and we got 2 more questions here. Any news on a West Coast hackathon?
Rudy, possibly. Just stay tuned. I see that you're from Phoenix, so I don't want to, let too many cats out of the bag right now. But how close are you to Los Angeles? What? What? Am I too much information? What?
Purely hypothetical.
Purely hypothetical.
Purely.
Just stay tuned. Pay attention to our blog and our Google Plus posts. There's one coming.
All right.
And
Great.
we'd really like to invite you out to see what you're doing. 3,000 photos per day.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rudy followed up here. 3,000 photos per day.
Well, I've got one, and I've got one which might work, but I have to talk to some folks, which is Google Storage. Google Storage is meant primarily as cloud storage for developers. So, and the quota there is completely based on what you pay. So with AppScript, right now we don't have different quota tiers that you can pay for because you don't pay for Google AppScript. So we don't really have a good way of giving you additional storage scalability. However, Google Storage already has billing. This is something you can enable with the API console. We need to figure out how to make that work nicely with Google AppScript. It should work using URL fetch. But some of the stuff is doing, you've got to go through OAuth flow and push things out.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone has written any sample code showing how to do that yet.
Yeah, I mean, the other nice thing about Drive is the other half of the question there was like, how do you get it so that it's hidden from the public but accessible within a domain and outside business partners, right? Drive is great at doing permissions. It's very easy to invite people and have things exposed to your domain. So we'll have to see what's the best fit between getting handling a lot of data, because Google Storage is meant for tons of data.
Right. That's
and
true.
And you're kind of right at that threshold where you're going from a little bit of data to a lot of data.
Right.
So
Google Storage also, I don't believe you can have. You have either public or private ACLs, and I don't think it gets any more complex than that, which could be a problem.
Yeah.
But the thing about the ACLs is that a lot of people, they just go by security by obscurity, which is that it's very hard for people to guess that URL, right? And like a lot of people do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on the sensitivity of the images, I suppose.
Yeah, that could influence the decision for sure.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, that seems to be all the things we have on the moderator page. Do we have anybody else in the live hangout that has questions?
We probably should have bounced back and forth between the moderator and the live hangout.
Yeah,
but
let me quit my
we'll correct that right now.
Little picture here. All right. So let's see. Checking the chat. There is something in the chat we have here too. John Kaufman asks, sample app is too small to be seen. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, we're trying to make it so that the resolution was a little better here, but like I said, it's in the Chrome Web Store. Search for Feed Plus, and you can take a look at it there. And then he also had a question about timestamping to look at the logger at millisecond resolution so I can test various architectures of my code.
So there are a couple of different ways that you can do this, right? And they're all a little bit flawed. So the question is, how can I test which parts of my code tend to be slower than others? And this is going to be a little bit tricky because the logger right now is not persistent. And what you can do is it's easy enough to collect the time in terms of milliseconds at the beginning of when you start an API call and at the end. Now the question is, how do you collect this data? And honestly, this is only useful if you run it over and over and over, like a large amount of time. And one thing you could do is you could store it into scriptdb. But the problem with the scriptdb solution is that now you have, well, no, the scriptdb solution works just fine because you're doing the write after you collect the time.
After you collect the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, by observing it, you're influencing how long it takes. But if you write it,
we're getting into quantum physics there, aren't we?
Yeah, we're getting into Heisenberg and certain principle and all that. And that's all I know about physics. So I just know that phrase.
Done.
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of people do. That's one thing that we do. We don't have a benchmarking tool built in yet. We haven't seen a lot of requests for this because typically a lot of our developers, what they look for are things on how can we reduce the runtime of this from the order of 10 seconds to an order of 3 or 4 seconds, as opposed to this thing runs in 20 milliseconds, I want to run in 10 milliseconds.
Yeah.
That's going to be a little bit trickier. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I think that it's definitely a lot of interest in performance today. We got a lot of questions about performance. So I think, obviously, the more we could do to provide tools to benchmark that, the better. I mean, obviously, you had some good suggestions there for kind of like making your own. But I think it could be worthwhile that if people are really looking to get like maximum performance, maybe we look at providing some more of those tools, and we can talk to the team about that.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I definitely have seen, for instance, HTML service, the performance has been improving very quickly. I've seen that the Orange team has been rolling out a lot of updates to that.
For sure.
So.
We got another question here in the chat from one of our participants asking, is there any documentation on client-side use of JavaScript and HTML service, like the limitations that the Kaha engine has for JavaScript? So I know we do have a page that kind of lists some of the basic restrictions. It's our tutorial, not quite a tutorial, but our guide on the HTML service. I think it's under user interfaces in our navigation structure. And in there we talk about some of them, but we are realizing that there are some things that you'd be used to doing in a regular HTML web app that in Kaha get a bit challenging.
Right.
I know today one of our colleagues just ran into a problem with onClick. Setting that on an element had some strange behavior depending upon what you were doing. So we're definitely looking at figuring out more of what those challenges are and coming up with solutions. I think the onClick one did have one solution kind of buried into the documentation already. So I think if you kind of give that another read, maybe do some Control F, find this kind of the words you're looking for, there may be something already in there.
There's a tool too that Corey mentioned that was useful, which is this Kaha. Was it this Kaha's code runner, script runner, sandbox? Sandbox. Yeah. Where what you can do is if you don't want to, if you just want to run one piece of code and see if it works, you can run it in a Kaha sandbox. But Kaha is known for being a little bit overly restrictive, on erring on the side of caution. So things that are malformed are going to cause problems.
Yeah.
You were talking about this last week.
Yeah, that bit me once.
What was the specific thing?
Yeah, the specific one was you create an object literal in JavaScript, like open squiggly, close squiggly, and key value pairs. After every key value pair, you add a comma to separate them, but you're not supposed to have a comma on the very last one. It's only to separate them, not at the end of every one. And if you had that comma, web browsers usually don't care, but Kaha cared, and it caused the problem. So
web browsers don't care, and I think Kaha is also specific about named keywords, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, there may be some limitations there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the main idea is that Kaha is trying to keep things safe, right? So they're going on like more of like a whitelist style approach, right? They know what's good JavaScript, and they're making you stick to that. And if you try to go outside those rounds, you might be doing something fishy. You might be trying to break out of the sandbox. They don't want that.
So we've been kind of neglecting the live audience who's been patiently waiting. Why don't we jump to some live audience members and see what's going on?
Yeah.
Or are you guys just kind of just watching the show?
Yeah, Rudy, John, any live questions?
Oh, is that Rudy?
Yes.
Hi, Rudy.
Hey, Rudy.
Sorry, I don't mean to help you jump the line. John, you've been patiently waiting since the beginning of the Hangout. How are you doing?
Looks like
it looks like he's going to
chatting.
type no microphone. But that's probably where he's going to go. Rudy, back to you.
I don't know. I'm trying to use Twitter Bootstrap with HTML service, and I'm running into a little bit of a problem with Kaha.
Okay.
Any plans of allowing bit of Bootstrap?
Yeah, so I actually just did a Plus post about this today. I think was it you, the one who created it?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so yeah, there was someone actually already out there. I actually wasn't that familiar with the Twitter Bootstrap, but it seems like it's basically a framework, a pre-built framework.
Right. It's very cool. And before you go on, how did you find out about this post?
Oh, via Google Plus in my RSS feed, you mean?
Oh, all right, continue.
But yeah, so someone had already actually created kind of like a working example version of it in AppScript, but said that they didn't have time to develop it. So check my Plus feed, and you can kind of take a look at what they've done so far. But I would imagine there would be challenges. You know, when you're taking JavaScript, and I've run into this myself, that's been developed like a library, even a very popular library. Right. It's usually got a lot of hands in it, and it's usually not 100% accurate to the script, to the specification. And so in those cases, Kaha, you know, is going to cause you some problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the challenge is the CSS.
Oh.
Yeah, you can't import CSS, and there was a JavaScript performance tip a while ago, and I know Kaha will definitely not allow this, where if you use document.write to write the script tag into it increases performance. I know, we're like going to some really bare metal stuff, but there are a lot of really crazy things that people do to make their libraries like really zip along.
That's true.
And Kaha is not going to like that.
Yeah.
The CSS, that's a good question. We don't allow imports of external CSS yet, and I don't know if we will be.
You can definitely bake it into your AppScript,
right?
But even then, I know there are some issues today that we were still investigating around styling the body tag, for instance. That's one we've had problems with. And you know, I think there was someone I talked to recently too that there's a CSS positioning, which is not relative, not. Anyway, fixed positioning, and that isn't allowed by Kaha because I think, you know, once again, Kaha's about embedding within another app, and you don't want your divs flying around.
That makes sense. So let's say that you're embedding your application in someone else's sites page. If you use fixed position, you could theoretically position over a Google My Account or logout, which really just, you know, sends you to some crazy phishing site or whatever.
Yeah, so in the context of a web app where you have the whole screen to yourself, some of these don't make quite as much sense, but it is part of the Kaha engine, and you know, we can talk to the team about if there's ways to disable bits here and there, but for the most part, you know, the things that Kaha does, it has a reason for, but it does create some problems when you just want to dump in a whole bunch of code and just run with it. When you're hand building it, you know, you can kind of handle these one at a time, take them into account, but when you're bringing in an external library or framework, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like that's something that comes up a lot, which is the look and feel thing. And Twitter Bootstrap, I've used it before. Yeah. It's pretty neat stuff. I've used it for some of my demos before.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty cool. It's too bad. Well, your sites all look like Twitter, but it solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And in fact, that new JavaScript library, Yeoman, Yeoman, it does. There's a Twitter Bootstrap.
Plugin for it.
I want to say Bootstrap. There's a Twitter Bootstrap. You can. It's very cool stuff. So if you're building web apps outside of AppScript, definitely check out Yeoman. I think it's Yeoman. I don't remember. It's yeoman.io. It's very cool. They've got this demo where you're editing code in an editor, and when you hit save, it updates the browser. I guess it's using browser channel. It's using you know, to push updates.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see if maybe we can talk to them about integrating with AppScript someday.
Yeah, I'd love to get those guys to do free work for us.
Sounds great. Well,
I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, just about out of time.
You guys don't know this, but our producer today is Jan, and she's hiding in the back, so she's actually just giggling at us and just making fun of us the whole time, trying to make us laugh on camera. But she's doing a great job producing, and she's warning us that
time is just about up. So we had some great questions and answers today. Thanks to everybody who came in for joining us and for the moderator questions ahead of time. You know, if you have anything else that you have questions about, Stack Overflow, the issue tracker for bugs, or reach out to us on Google+. Okay. That's about it.
All right. Take care, everyone. It was good to see you.
Thank you.
Or for you to see us.
Bye-bye.